Good evening, everyone, and happy Halloween. We want to welcome you to our sixth um, edition of our Mental Health is a Serious Matter webinar. Just to share a little bit about what we have been doing with regards to this series, we have been really trying to ensure that people recognize that mental health is a serious matter, number one, but number two, also that there are resources available and that we don't have to be afraid to ask for support. Um, so I come to you with greetings this evening from the Xi Zeta Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. And I just want to share from our leadership, our chapter president, Courtney Coffey, and our program chair and vice president, Tracy Harrison, who were unable to attend today, but we welcome you on their behalf. And tonight we are going to talk about some specifics about some mental health conditions, some tips that can be helpful, as well as how can we combat stigma. So let's just get started. I am going to be introducing our speaker this evening. And if you haven't followed us for these series, the format is basically we want to share some information. We are coming to you live on this Facebook format, as well as it's being recorded on YouTube, our YouTube page, so that you can refer someone to this program on YouTube after today, because we really want to make sure that we can get the information out. So again, we're going to be talking about various mental health issues, and our speaker tonight, I am going to introduce her now. Tanya Logan, she's an LCSWC. She has over 30 years of professional clinical experience working with those managing conflict and trauma. A native Washingtonian, she received her bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Virginia and her master's degree in social work from the University of Maryland at Baltimore. Ms. Logan spent the bulk of her career in DC and Maryland, working with biological parents and foster parents by securing permanency, whether via reunification, adoption, or independent living. She was the clinical director of a program which provided in-home services to families at risk of abuse and or neglect. And in an attempt to strengthen and stabilize them, they would be diverted so that they could be diverted from the child welfare system. Ms. Logan was a contractor with an organization which she facilitated 10-week grief groups for those impacted by homicide following her certification as a grief recovery specialist. She transitioned to being the supervisory social worker in a non-public school for students diagnosed with learning differences, emotional challenges, and or autism. Ms. Logan is also the founder and CEO of Kayla's Village, which began in July of 2007, which is a premier provider of innovative seminars and supportive resources for individuals, families, professionals, and communities. Additionally, she is a clinician providing counseling to individuals and couples, provides contractual supervision, teaches family violence and child abuse as an adjunct professor at Trinity Washington University as well, and serves on the advisory committee for the Center for Infant and Child Loss. Ms. Logan is an active church member of Trinity AME Zion Church and a published author of Mommy's Bright Sunshine, speaking to the reality that we can move beyond our trials, tragedies, and trauma without allowing it to define our future. Ms. Logan is the parent of 2 children, one by adoption and one by birth, and has hosted exchange students in her home. Obviously, she tries to tailor her life in order to help others. The next voice that you will hear will be that of our distinguished this evening, Ms. Tanya Logan.
Well, very good, and thank you so much for that introduction as well as the opportunity to share with others, because it needs more and obviously less stigma, so that we can all get the help that we need, as well as our loved ones, we can offer them help as well. So, Nicole, if you could show the first video, it's only about 2 minutes long, which does address stigma that we will be talking about this evening. If we're having trouble uploading the video, I'm happy to, move forward.
How do people around you talk about mental health? Do they use words like nutcase, maniac?
While we're trying to get the video, let's go, I'm going to go ahead. Oh, here it is.
People around you. They use words nutcase, maniac, or psycho. Do they only bring up mental health after something bad happens in the news? Do your friends, family, or coworkers treat you differently when they learn you have a mental health disability? If this sounds familiar, you're not alone. All these negative messages create powerful stigmas against the 20% of Americans who live with mental health disabilities. That's 1 in 5 people. But because of stigma, we rarely talk about how common it is to have a mental health disability. And if you start to believe these negative messages, you might be experiencing internalized depression, or what's known as self-stigma. Self-stigma can feel like a wall surrounding you. It may cause you to feel embarrassment or shame. It might become a barrier to forming authentic relationships. And it could lead you to lose out on getting the social support you need. You can combat self-stigma, but first remember that you are not alone. Remember that number from before? 1 out of 5 people have a mental health disability. There's a lot of us out here in all walks of life. Finding a community can help defeat self-stigma. You can start by having a candid conversation with friends to share how you're feeling. You may choose to connect with a peer-led group, or maybe find an online community. And there is a large and growing community of people with mental health disabilities organizing to fight back against stigma and negative attitudes in society as a whole. Speaking out, writing, advocating, different forms of activism can lead to change and help us find community. For more information in Washington State, contact Disability Rights Washington at 800-562-2702 or go to disability.
All right. Thank you. So you see that we talked about stigma in all walks of life, different groups, categories, populations, and if we lessen the stigma, we certainly can get the help we need, again, as well as giving help to our loved ones. So let's just look briefly about the etiology of depression and anxiety. There can be a genetic link. While there's no definitive cause of depression and anxiety, there's evidence that they can be inherited, as it is more common in those with biological family members who are also sufferers. The environment can be involved. It's believed to be a possible cause of depression and anxiety with high stress situations such as loss of a job, death of a loved one, financial difficulties, etc. Other factors that have an impact include having been neglected as a child, sexual and physical abuse, whether in childhood or adulthood, and other types of maltreatment that affect the development of emotional health. Gender is also a factor. Major depressive disorder, dysthymia, which is underlying depression, and anxiety are more prevalent among women than men, and this difference appears in different cultures throughout the world. But my belief is that We do have perhaps higher rates than is currently documented in men, but that's because I believe it is underreported. So based on statistics and studies, it seems that depression is more readily diagnosed in females, but again, I believe it's underreported in men. And we need to also be aware, though, that some major illnesses can cause anxiety and depression. So I always recommend that people get screened by their primary care physician as well. Not everyone becomes depressed or anxious under similar circumstances. The intensity and duration of events, as well as each individual's genetics, coping skills and reaction, and social support network contribute to the likelihood of or protection from an individual developing depression and anxiety. So sometimes these characteristics will develop because of the relationships that are involved, the intimacy of a relationship, the circumstances, if there's been repeated traumas, for instance. So if someone experiences a loss of a close family member, that can lead to depression and anxiety, as opposed to someone who was, an extended like a coworker or someone like that people may not be as close to, like an acquaintance. But if someone has lost a loved one and lost their job and developed an extensive illness, then that could also lead to depression because it's been compounded. I really like this slide because when we talk about masking, you see that this gentleman, he looks very happy on the outside, the way he is presenting himself, but really how he is feeling internally is he could be depressed or anxious, he could be frustrated, disgusted, numb even, all of those things, but he's presenting to the world that he's very happy. And why might that be? It could be because of stigma, that he doesn't want anyone to know how he's actually feeling. But this other clip, which is only about 4 minutes, if we could share that, someone talks about her experience with depression and what it could possibly have led to.
My name is Jules. In 2017, was diagnosed with major depressive disorder. I almost lost this battle. I didn't think it was going to get better, but it did. I've had anxiety since I was a little kid. I always had this feeling that something terrible was going to happen, and that presented itself in tightness in my chest. I'd get really shaky. I would have a lot of stomach pain. Those were the physical ways that it came out. For the longest time, I didn't know that was my anxiety. I just knew that was something that happened to me. Around middle school, I started to get depressed, and it progressively got worse as I got into high school. Everything just seemed kind of gray. And a lot of worthlessness too. I don't have anything to offer. From the outside, I think I hid it pretty well. I was a straight-A student. I hung out with my friends. I babysat all the time. I was involved in my church youth group. I didn't let people see that there was something going on. That was what stayed closed behind my bedroom door. Things started to feel more heavy. I started to self-harm as a way to cope. I started having suicidal ideation. I told my mom, I don't think I can keep myself safe. And I know my parents were shocked when they knew how bad it actually was. It was on a Sunday night. My mom called Children's, their hotline. I was evaluated by a social worker. And I think it was honestly the first time I was completely open about what was happening. And I told my social worker that I didn't necessarily want to die. And I knew that I needed a break from what was happening, from all the things I was feeling. And death seemed like the only option. I just remember crying to her and being like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I'm stuck. Here I was completely broken. I could barely see the point in staying alive. I felt so ashamed of myself. And these people, they just treated me like a person. I felt validated and I had some hope. And I knew that okay, when I ask for help, help is given and it works. And I knew that this break I was looking for could be found in a hospital room instead of dying. Today, I am in remission from my depression for the first time in who knows how long. I'm getting to know parts of me that aren't just anxious and depressed Julia. I'm clean from self-harm. I'm majoring in social work, and I really want to work in behavioral health with children, specifically in a crisis or inpatient setting. I've started to become really passionate about advocating once I made it to the other side, because I almost didn't make it. You're not at fault for where you are right now. It's okay to be afraid, but I don't want you to give up. Because the thing about depression is it lies. You got to fight to be here because it does get better. And all of these lies will eventually go away. You just have to hold on because it doesn't get to win. It doesn't get to take you. So you're stronger than that and you're worth more than that. And it's possible.
So I like that brief clip in part because I don't know if you noticed on her shirt it said break stigmas, but initially she didn't want to let others see what was going on. She felt ashamed, but thankfully she reached out to her mom. Her mom was able to get her help, and now she's able to give back and help others, studying social work, and wants to offer help to others who are suffering. So I want everyone to know that seeking help is a sign of strength. So in this clip, it just shows what people think depression is. Often people think that depression is just complete sadness. You're crying all the time. You're blue. And that certainly can be a part of depression. But sometimes what people actually feel, it could be nothing. They could feel numb. Certainly sadness. Could be some self-loathing. In Julia's story, you heard that she was self-harming at one point. People can feel hopeless. They can isolate themselves. Certainly anxiety can be a part of it. They can feel guilty about different things. So if someone is not just moping around all the time, sad and crying, that doesn't mean necessarily that they are not experiencing depression. Again, if they're disconnected because they're isolated or feeling nothing, that can also be a sign that needs to be explored further. So depressed people may experience difficulty focusing and having difficulty making decisions, negative thought processes, poor self-esteem, thoughts of hurting oneself, like Julia had said she didn't think she could keep herself safe, lack of motivation or being easily irritated, feeling ill. We call those psychosomatic disorders. So you have headaches a lot or stomach aches a lot and there's no medical reason. It could be because of some emotions. People can feel helpless or hopeless. Now, for clinical depression, these symptoms cause the individual significant distress or impairment in social, occupational, and other important areas of functioning that are not related to substance abuse or another medical condition. People who feel anxious may experience muscle tension, shaking and trembling, again, upset stomach, butterflies, headaches, backaches, rapid heart rate, numbness, or even increased perspiration. When we talk about stigma, just to define it, it's an attitude of fear or disapproval toward people with different characteristics that can lead to low self-esteem, poor quality of life, reduced productivity, and other profound effects. For most, this carries over into the workplace, with fewer than 1 in 10 employees reporting their workplace being free of mental health stigma. So if you feel that your workplace does stigmatize someone getting help for mental health conditions, then you will probably be less likely to reach out for help. Most organizations now have an EAP program, an employee assistance program that is confidential, but if the climate is that you're not going to be accepted, you may not utilize those services. The shame associated with needing mental health can be deeply harmful. It also fuels misconceptions about mental illness, such as the false idea that people with mental health conditions are weak, flawed, or incapable of being productive employees. But I just want to say once again that reaching out for help is a sign of strength, because there's no need for anyone to suffer any more than they need to, where there's so many interventions, whether it's therapy. We'll talk more about some additional strategies, journaling, medications, many things that are available to assist. 8 out of 10 workers experiencing a mental health illness do not reach out for support because of stigma. Untreated mental health disorders can cause a significant amount of suffering for employees, including risky behaviors like substance use, difficulty sleeping, work and relationship problems, and worsening mental health. In addition to the emotional toil, people with untreated mental health conditions are more likely to suffer from serious and costly physical health issues, such as even heart disease and diabetes. So, feeling sad and blue for a short time may be manageable, but if it's long standing, it can lead to even physical conditions. And then, of course, there is medication that is available. Some people simply do not want to take medication. They feel if they're taking medication that they're giving in to their feelings or what have you. But I really liked this where a guy suffering from anxiety takes medication to address it. A friend said, anxiety is still there, but you're masking it. He said, that's the point. In the winter, the cold is still there, but I wear a coat to mask it. So medications can be one option. It doesn't have to be the first line that people rely upon, but it definitely can make a difference. And I have found that in my practice that people who are medicated are often more available for the resources that are offered within counseling sessions. Some truths about anxiety that on the outside, kind of if you go back to think about the slide with the man who is presenting as though he's happy, and in the underline he's feeling differently. So with anxiety on the outside, we can feel calm, confident, and collected, but on the inside, actually feeling chaotic and overwhelmed. I can't let anyone else see that. So again, they try to mask it. Feeling that they're always in control, or presenting that they're always in control, when in reality they feel that something will go wrong if I don't do it myself. On the outside, they're meeting deadlines early, always working harder than needed. On the inside, wanting to prove my worth and value by doing more than what I'm expected to do. And then on the outside, always eager to help people, and they overcompensate, where internally, I don't want people to think that I don't care or I'm incapable. So sometimes we set up unrealistic expectations of ourselves that we're not able to meet, which can then increase both anxiety and depression. This slide is about depression and suicide. Depression certainly is a major risk factor for suicide. The deep despair and hopelessness that goes along with depression can make suicide feel like the only way to escape the pain. And you heard Julia say that she really didn't want to die. She just didn't know that there were other options available. So this is the last clip we will look at, and it's about 2 minutes.
I want. My daughter Libby, she was a very active athlete. She was a swimmer, had some of the fastest times in the country when she was around 10 years old. But around 12 or 13, she began to struggle with depression. While she was in therapy, It allowed her to go on through life. She graduated from college, started a family, took on a job. Friends and her new family were not supportive of her going to see a shrink, going to see a psychologist or a therapist, or being on medication. And so she too often tried to deal with it without the support and without the medication that helped her. My daughter Libby was 36 years old when she took her own life. Yeah, so if you have any sense that you might be depressed, please don't wait to go talk to a health professional. That could be your family physician, that could be a mental health professional.
So you see from, excuse me, that clip that she was an athlete, well liked, had a family, was just doing some great things, and then Libby at 36, died because of, as the dad said, from her depression, that she took her own life. But he even mentioned how friends and her new family stigmatized her about going to get help. Most people who die by suicide, they simply want the pain to stop. And they can, then suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. If you ever are thinking, though, that someone may be so depressed that they may be contemplating suicide, it is totally fine to even bring that up, to ask them, have they thought about harming themselves? No one is going to be giving someone else the thought or the idea to commit suicide. Usually it's the opposite, that they feel like now someone really has heard me, someone is interested, someone cares and can see that I can get help and that I'm really not alone. Some of the people that I mention when I do talk to some of my clients or other colleagues, if you think about Anthony Bourdain, who had the TV shows with cooking, and he's traveling around the world and all of that, so he has fame and fortune, and then he died by suicide. Kate Spade, who, a fashion designer, again, traveling around the world, had talked to her father about an hour before and talking about an upcoming trip that she was going on, and about an hour after she spoke to her father, she hung herself. You heard certainly about Naomi Judd, who was, her daughter Ashley was visiting with her. Ashley went out to greet someone who was coming to visit, and just in those few minutes, Naomi had shot herself. So fame and fortune don't protect anyone. All of us can be touched by depression, anxiety, suicide. Now, the one person that I typically don't group in the category of, the celebrities who have died by suicide is Robin Williams. Although he did hang himself, he also was diagnosed with the Lewy body dementia. And so he had an underlying medical cause that could possibly have influenced his decision making. So again, we had mentioned earlier about ensuring that you get a complete medical workup to see if any of that could be involved in some of how people are feeling emotionally. So on these slides, it just shows the rates of suicide and homicide, the discrepancies throughout the years or what have you. The thing is that, again, we had mentioned that females are often more frequently diagnosed with mental health challenges like depression and anxiety. And the reality is that females often attempt suicide at greater numbers than males. However, males are more likely to actually die by suicide because they're more likely to use lethal means like hanging or shooting themselves in the head, for instance. Females are more likely to take pills and then maybe be rescued. Someone finds them, or they become scared and reach out for help and, can get to the hospital. That does not mean that females don't hang themselves. Again, that's what Kate Spade did, and don't shoot themselves or what have you. But statistically, more females typically attempt suicide, but more males actually die by suicide. This just talks about teenage versus adult depression because there often are differences. Teenagers may be more irritable or angry rather than sad a lot of the time. They certainly can be sad, but people often feel that that's just a part of, the teenage years. And so, again, that's why teens need to be monitored as well. Do they have unexplained aches and pains? So again, psychosomatic disorders. So there's no underlying medical cause, but do they have, lots of headaches, stomach aches, things like that, that could indicate depression. Extreme sensitivity to criticism, again, may feel that those are just the teenage years, but if teens are being plagued by feelings of worthlessness and are being extremely vulnerable to criticism, rejection, and failure, if they're overachievers, those could be some signs. So if they have perfectionistic tendencies and don't measure up to, again, these unrealistic expectations, that can be a cause for alarm. Are they withdrawing from some but perhaps not all people? While adults may isolate themselves when depressed, teenagers typically keep some friendships. So if they're pulling away from some groups but not others, that requires more exploration. And for teenagers, again, untreated depression can lead to problems at school, substance use and abuse, eating disorders, self-injury, violence, running away, low self-esteem, internet addiction, reckless behavior, and again, suicide. I remember working with a 17-year-old who was in foster care, and she told me that whenever the memories got so overwhelming for her, she would run away. But, as we talked, I said, but as you are running away, don't your memories and thoughts go with you? But for whatever reason, that was how she managed her anxiety, and then she would return to the foster home when she was better regulated and was able to calm down. So anytime someone talks of suicide or has any type of suicidal gestures, we need to certainly take it seriously because it can definitely lead to suicide. A book I read called Crazy Faith from Pastor Michael Todd says, even now, when the depression's so bad, death feels like the best option. If you've ever been depressed, you know that things don't just start looking up. Better days could be just around the corner, but depression doesn't let you see a way to get from here to there. Optimism has no power over depression. In fact, happy, clappy positivity often makes a depressed person feel more hopeless. At times in my life when I have felt down, sometimes people have said to me, well, sometimes people have it worse, or there are those who have it worse. And I say that's true, but there are also sometimes there are people who have it better. So let's not further burden people who are, already feeling down and are reaching out for help. For teens, again, I just want to point out, don't say to them, like, this is the best time of your life. Just wait until you become an adult and you have all these responsibilities and bills to pay and things like that. If a teenager is feeling like this is really a hard, difficult time, and then you or someone is essentially saying it's going to get worse, that could lead them to think more about thoughts of suicide. We need to offer hope and encouragement and be there to listen rather than judge. Telling someone simply to focus on the positivity, again, may further burden them. So just little quick calming strategies, and there's a video, we're not going to look at that today, but related to de-stressing and anxiety. But some of the things people can do if they're feeling down, stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, I encourage people to first stop and just take a pause, because we don't want to continue to use those, reinforce those negative thoughts that we're having. So we stop and take a pause and think of different ways to be mindful. We can certainly practice gratitude, and that does not mean that everything is perfect in our lives, but what are things for which we can be grateful, and try to shift our thinking. We can meditate, and I used to tell people that I can't meditate because my mind is always racing, and then I read somewhere it said that when we worry, we're actually meditating, and I had to think about that. We're sort of reinforcing the negativity. So let's stop and shift our thinking to something else. Saying affirmations are another way to be mindful. So we can say things like, I am in control of my emotions, or if that doesn't feel comfortable, we can say, I'm working to be in control of my emotions, something like that. What are things that will be affirming for us? EFT tapping is emotional freedom tapping, and basically the way I describe it is similar to like acupuncture. Wherever the energy is stuck is where they put the needles in. Well, EFT tapping, you tap on different parts of your body and you kind of get some of that energy to flow. Color breathing is a form of deep breathing where you breathe in a calming color, typically on the count of 3, hold it for 2, and push out a negative anxiety-producing color on the count of 4. And I typically suggest that people do that at least 3 times and practice it when you're calm, because as you're regulating your breathing, your brain is getting more oxygen, and as you're regulating your heart rate, you're slowing down your heart rate, so therefore you don't feel nearly as anxious. We can relax by taking a bath, even taking a warm shower. Imagine that the negative feelings are going down the drain. Can read a book, listen to music, get outside, sit on the porch, go for a walk, do a workout, go to a gym. If you can't afford to go to a gym, can you walk around your neighborhood? If it's cold and icy outside, you can walk around your living space, walk up and down stairs, do a YouTube video. You can create, so sing a song, clean, crochet, knit, needlepoint, journal. And I always point out that journaling doesn't have to be like a diary where you write down everything. You can simply write down the negative, hard feelings, so you purge or dump onto the piece of paper and then tear it up and throw it away. And then connect. So you can cuddle with a pet, stuffed animal, pillow, look at family photos, vacation photos. You can call a friend. And calling a friend, again, doesn't mean that you call someone and share all your woes, because we can't trust everyone that way. But do you have a friend that makes you laugh, that you reminisce about, college days, vacation, something like that, just to give your mind a chance to shift? Obviously, none of these techniques will change your circumstances, but it'll give you a chance to take a pause, to refocus, to regroup, to gain some energy, so hopefully you can better deal with your circumstances. Oh, and I like this handout because it has some passive strategies like the color breathing, as well as some active strategies like working out. So that is really all that I have for this evening. So I'm just wondering if people have questions or any aha moments, or any comments, or anything they would like to share.
I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation. It was so much great information. A couple of things I just wanted to, we didn't have a lot of questions, and we didn't have any questions in the comments. There were a few comments that I'll read, but I do want to talk about a few things that you mentioned just to highlight them. Medical issues can be a real trigger for someone's mental health as well. Having a new diagnosis of some medical issue that, especially if it's potentially fatal, that can be a huge distress and even a trigger for suicidal thoughts. And then we talked about, which I thought was so great, you talked about the risk for suicide. We don't talk about that enough, especially in our Black communities. And so it really is important that we also talk about lethal means. And if we have guns in the home, be sure that we're securing them just in case, family members in the home are at risk and we don't know it, or we ourselves become at risk. And we want to make sure that we're safe.
Yes.
I'm going to also
Excellent
look and see if there were some comments that I'll share.
Okay.
Someone said, wow, that was a great, powerful video. And I think this was the one about Jenny and how things can be going well on the outside, but someone could be suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I saw in the chat as well, someone mentioned that 911 is for emergencies medically, but since July of last year, now in a mental health crisis, you can call 988, which is a great resource across the country where people can reach out for some support for mental health issues. So as long as you know that as a family member, you know that you can get some help for your loved one. Did you want to?
I'm sorry. I was just saying thank you for mentioning that, the 988. Absolutely.
I don't see any other questions. Oh, I did hear someone mention thank you. Worrying is meditation, just meditating on the wrong things.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last comment, I appreciate the many suggestions you gave about, about how to distract yourself until you have the energy to deal when depressed. And that's really powerful too.
Right.
Okay.
I will just lastly say that I've seen the color breathing work for myself. At one point, my blood pressure was being monitored. And if I took my blood pressure and did the color breathing and then took it again, it actually had come down a few points. And now it's no longer being monitored. So I do know that that can help, to get us regulated, just as one strategy.
So I want to just say thank you, everyone, for joining us this month for our sixth in our series of 8 sessions about mental health and its importance, entitled Mental Health is a Serious Matter. We started this in May, and like I said, this is our 6th event. And I just want to give a shout out to the committee. So Nicole is here with us today, but our committee has done an excellent job of helping us find speakers as well as helping us on the day of the presentation. So thank you for the committee and our leadership. I just want to give you a heads up that our next session, excuse me, our 7th session will be in November. The date is November 28th, which is the Tuesday after, excuse me, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. We're going to be talking about mental health pharmacology. Our resident PharmD, Dr. Leslie Goffney, will be on and talk about tips and myths about mental health medication. So please join us on November 28th at 7 p.m. And then our final session will be in December, where we're going to focus on self-care and some of those coping strategies that Tanya Logan just talked to us about, journaling and breathing strategies, and some of those things that we can do to really make sure that we prioritize self-care. And what a better time to do that in December, because we're always running around, serving others, helping others, doing nice things for others, but we have to remember to put ourselves first. So with that said, I want to thank you all. I appreciate that you've joined us. We thank our speaker. Tanya, thank you so much. Your expertise, we really appreciate you sharing that knowledge with us. And we hope that we can have you come back when we do this again next year. But thank you so much, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you.